In the records of near-death experiences gathered by Dr. Elizabeth Kübler-Ross, there is one case that always stood out for the purity and serenity of its account. It was that of an 8-year-old boy, called Luke here, whose singular experience was documented in the researcher's own personal notes. According to accounts from family members and the medical team, the episode occurred after a brief physical collapse that suspended his vital functions for a few moments. However, more than the biological event itself, it was the lucidity of his subsequent memories that caught the doctor's attention. Kübler-Ross describes that Luke spoke with an unusual calmness for his age. He said he had felt a great silence, a kind of pause where time seemed to have ceased to exist. There was no fear, no darkness, only a space of tranquility so complete that the very notion of being alive or dead seemed irrelevant. When the doctor asked what he remembered most about that instant, the boy replied that it was like when the wind stops and the world listens. This poetic image became one of the most quoted phrases by her in lectures about consciousness and the continuity of life after the body. During the subsequent interviews, Luke described a clear perception of being outside his body, but without any suffering. He reported observing the people around him with an almost unlimited empathy, as if he could feel what each of them was feeling. Kübler-Ross noted that, for a child, this type of emotional language was rare. There was no dramatization, no confusion. The boy simply narrated what had happened with the simplicity of someone recounting a profoundly real dream. The doctor highlighted in her notes that this case brought a notable element: the total absence of fear. Even when talking about something that, for an adult, might evoke terror, Luke conveyed peace. He described the sensation of being enveloped by a loving presence, which had no definite form, but which radiated an indescribable tenderness. "It was someone who knew who I was, even without me saying anything," he explained. For Kübler-Ross, this type of description was repeated in various accounts from children, suggesting that the child's perception of transcendence is more direct, less filtered by cultural beliefs or fears. As she concluded the first interview, Elizabeth wrote down a sentence that expressed her personal impact. "There are moments when the truth comes in a child's voice, and it is in that voice that the mystery becomes simple." Luke smiled when he heard that his words would be kept in a book, and simply replied, "Light is not a place. It's what we remember when we stop being afraid." Before the episode that would change everything, Luke was a typical child growing up in a small American town. He liked climbing trees, collecting rocks, and spending entire afternoons drawing spaceships. He was curious in an almost insatiable way, always asking his mother why people cried when they were happy, or why the sky changed color at sunset. He had a vivid imagination, but also a sense of calm that drew the attention of everyone around him. His teacher said he had the gaze of an old sage, an expression that amused the family without anyone knowing how symbolic that observation would become. Kübler-Ross recorded in her notes that the boy seemed to possess, even before the experience, an unusual sensitivity for his age. His mother recounted that from a very young age, Luke would say he had dreams where he spoke with his deceased grandfather, and that those conversations always brought him peace. Instead of fear, he felt curiosity. Once, when asked what he thought about death, he naturally replied, "I think it's when we go back inside the light." This sentence, noted in an old notebook of his mother's, would be mentioned by the doctor years later as evidence of an intuitive awareness about the topic she dedicated her entire life to studying. Luke's family lived simply. His father worked in a mechanic shop, and his mother dedicated herself to the home and activities at the local church. There was nothing extraordinary about the environment he grew up in, and perhaps that is why the contrast between his daily life and what he experienced during the collapse was so striking for Kübler-Ross. In her field records, she observed that the absence of extreme beliefs or rigid doctrines made Luke's account especially neutral, free from religious interpretations. The boy spoke of love and light, but never of judgment, which reinforced the authenticity of his experience. In later conversations, the doctor realized that Luke was not seeking attention. When asked about what he had felt, he answered with simplicity, like someone talking about something natural, part of a cycle that everyone would one day know. Kübler-Ross wrote that, Luke seemed to carry the serenity of one who has already understood what adults spend their lives trying to remember. His presence made the surroundings softer, and many professionals reported a sense of peace when talking with him. What was most impressive was the contrast between his youth and the depth of his words. While other children spoke of toys and adventures, Luke said that the most beautiful thing in life is when someone listens with their heart. The doctor believed that understanding who he was before the experience was essential to understanding the impact of everything that would come after. Because for her, the way a soul sees the world before crossing the threshold of consciousness says a lot about what it will find on the other side. According to the records of Dr. Elizabeth Kübler-Ross, the episode that marked Luke's experience occurred on an ordinary day during a summer afternoon. There was no serious accident or traumatic scenario, just an instant when the body seemed to turn off from the world, as the doctor herself described in her report. His mother reported that the boy suddenly fainted, without warning, and remained unconscious for a few minutes. What happened within that brief interval of time was what turned the case into one of the most enigmatic ever analyzed by Kübler-Ross. When he regained consciousness, Luke did not seem confused or scared. On the contrary, he showed a calm that disconcerted even the healthcare professionals who attended to him. Asked if he remembered anything, he replied, "Yes, but not with my eyes." This phrase puzzled the team and was one of the first to be noted by the doctor. In subsequent interviews, Luke recounted that the moment everything became silent, he felt as if he were floating, observing people moving below, not with fear, but with curiosity. He said it was like watching a movie of myself, and that he could perceive what each person around him felt. His mother's worry, the doctor's concentration, the rush in their gestures. It was as if everyone's love was a color I could see, he said. Kübler-Ross highlighted the purity of this description. She observed that Luke did not seem to be trying to interpret or understand what he had lived through. He was just narrating, with the spontaneity of someone recounting an everyday memory. When questioned about what led him to realize he was out of his body, he said he heard a sound from within, something like a gentle call, a vibration that drew him upward. And then, the physical environment disappeared. In its place, there was a silent presence, a clarity that did not hurt, that did not blind, but that seemed to recognize who he was. The doctor noted that, during the account, Luke's eyes filled with an emotion difficult to describe. It was neither sadness nor euphoria, but something she called a sacred memory. He said everything felt bigger than the world, and that time did not exist there, only a sensation of being completely whole. Kübler-Ross saw in this type of testimony a common pattern among children who had near-death experiences: the absence of religious metaphors and the predominance of universal perceptions: light, love, calm, union. When the boy finished recounting what he remembered, he was silent for a few seconds and added, "I think the body is like clothes we put on to play here. When they stop fitting, we go back to who we were before." This sentence, simple and unpretentious, was cited by Kübler-Ross in several conferences in the following years. For her, that child's comment synthesized, with poetic clarity, everything her studies sought to prove: that consciousness does not end with the body, it only changes form. According to Elizabeth Kübler-Ross's personal records, it was at this point in Luke's account that the narrative took on an almost mystical tone. When describing what happened after he felt his body become distant, the boy used words that, although simple, carried an extraordinary emotional precision. He said that suddenly, everything around him transformed into a soft clarity, not a light that blinded, but one that welcomed. It was like entering the lap of the sun, he recounted. The doctor noted this sentence with admiration, observing that the boy spoke effortlessly, as if he were describing a familiar place, not something supernatural. Luke explained that he did not see walls, nor floor, nor sky. There was only this living luminosity, which seemed to pulsate along with him. There was no noise, only a complete silence, where, paradoxically, he felt that everything was speaking to him, but without words. It was like I understood what the light meant just by being in it, he explained. Kübler-Ross observed that the boy's tone changed when narrating this part. His voice became lighter, the rhythm more paused, as if he were still there. For her, this type of change was a sign of authenticity. The body seemed to remember a state that the mind was still trying to translate. During the interview, Luke mentioned something he called the presence. He couldn't say if it was a person, an energy, or a feeling. He just stated that it was someone who knew everything about me. The doctor asked him if he felt fear, and he replied with a calm smile, "No, I felt like I was being seen in a good way." This answer, simple and disarming, deeply marked Kübler-Ross, who wrote in her research diary, "The absence of fear is the true sign of spiritual recognition." Luke said that this presence enveloped him like an embrace that could not be seen, and that in it he understood something he had never understood, that he was loved not because of what he did, but simply for existing. The light, according to Luke, seemed conscious. It was not just a physical clarity, but a loving intelligence. It knew when I wanted to ask something, he explained, and it answered without saying anything. Kübler-Ross was impressed with how the child described telepathic communication, something that frequently appeared in adult accounts, but rarely with such purity in children. Luke did not use technical terms, he just described feelings. He said that, at a certain moment, he thought of his mother and immediately felt her love as a wave of warmth within the light. It was as if human love and the love that surrounded him were the same thing. In her final notes from that session, Elizabeth wrote, "In Luke, the mystery is not recounted as an exception, but as a memory. He does not speak of the light as something he found. He speaks as someone who recognized what was always there." Among all the moments recounted by Luke, this one was the most moving for Dr. Elizabeth Kübler-Ross. He described that within that living and conscious light, something began to approach. It was not a human figure in the physical sense, but a presence that revealed itself through feeling. "I knew it was someone," he explained, "but I didn't need to see a face or hear a name. It was as if love had turned into a person." The doctor observed that when talking about this, the boy closed his eyes and smiled, like someone recalling an old embrace. There was a tenderness in his words that made the interview room become silent, almost reverent. Luke recounted that this presence communicated only with the heart. He said he felt completely known, not just remembered, but understood. "It knew everything I had done, even the things I thought were wrong, but it still loved me," he said. For Kübler-Ross, this was the essence of what she called absolute, unconditional love, described similarly by people from different cultures and beliefs. In Luke's case, the account carried no doctrine, only the purity of a direct emotion. He said that this love did not judge, did not ask for anything, it only welcomed. "It was as if I had returned home, and it had been waiting for me all along." In her notes, Elizabeth wrote that the boy's gaze at this point in the interview was almost transparent. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully, as if the very act of remembering required delicacy. Luke mentioned that he felt a kind of invitation to remain there or to return. "It didn't tell me to go back, it just showed me that I could choose. And when I thought of my mother, the light smiled." This passage was described by the doctor as one of the most beautiful she had ever heard in her entire career. There were no elements of fear, nor authority, only freedom and love. Kübler-Ross interpreted the account as a reflection of the purest state of consciousness, one in which the human being recognizes his unity with something greater. She observed that Luke seemed to understand, without needing explanations, what adults spend their lives searching for: the certainty that life is sustained by a love that does not depend on merit. The boy summarized this understanding in a sentence that Elizabeth would repeat in various lectures. The light doesn't want us to be perfect. It just wants us to remember who we are. When the interview ended, the doctor remained silent for a few minutes, moved. Later, she wrote in her diary, "Luke's case is not just a scientific observation. It is a reminder that spiritual truth can fit into a child's voice without losing the depth of the infinite." In the following sessions, Elizabeth Kübler-Ross sought to understand the visions reported by Luke, not as mystical phenomena, but as symbolic windows of an expanded consciousness. The boy spoke of these memories naturally, like someone revisiting a beloved place. He said that, enveloped by the light, he began to see images that were not just from the past, but also of something that seemed to be happening in all times simultaneously. It was as if time had opened up like a book, and I could read all the pages at once, he recounted. Kübler-Ross noted that the account possessed a rare coherence, even for an adult, and that Luke described each scene with serenity, without confusion or fear. Among the visions, he said he had reviewed moments of his own life, not in a judgmental way, but as an affectionate review. "I saw when I made my mother laugh, and the light got stronger. When I fought with someone, the light didn't get dimmer, but it showed me what the other person felt. It was as if it wanted to teach me what true love is." This sentence, recorded by the doctor, became one of the most cited in her lectures on empathy and compassion. Luke did not speak of guilt, but of learning. He said that the light helped him understand that every gesture of kindness created a glow, and every act of pain only asked for a new gesture of love to be transformed. At a certain moment, Luke reported having seen other people, some known, others not. They didn't speak, they just smiled. It seemed like they were happy that I remembered who I was. Kübler-Ross described this segment as a testimony of spiritual reunion, typical of childhood experiences, in which consciousness tends to perceive the continuity of life as something natural. The boy also spoke of a kind of city made of sound and light, where everything vibrated in harmony. When the doctor asked if it seemed like a dream, he replied, "No. Dreams end when we wake up. That was the opposite. That was when I really woke up." The most striking point, however, was when Luke explained what he had understood about existence. He said that life was a school to learn to remember love, and that every person had a hidden purpose within themselves. "The problem is that we forget when we get here," he stated. Kübler-Ross noted that, for an 8-year-old child, this idea was extraordinarily mature. She wrote, "He does not speak of religion, he speaks of spiritual memory. He does not preach belief, he describes an experience of consciousness." Before concluding that session, Luke added a sentence that the doctor underlined in red in her notebook. "When we understand love, everything that exists makes sense, even what hurts." For Elizabeth, that boy had transformed a clinical experience into a universal lesson about compassion, purpose, and the continuity of the soul. According to Elizabeth Kübler-Ross's notes, Luke's account of his return was the most delicate of all. He described the moment the light began to move away, not as a loss, but as an invitation to remember. "It didn't disappear," he recounted. "It just got farther away, as if telling me, now it's your turn to shine down there." The doctor recorded that, when narrating this moment, the boy showed an impressive serenity, but also a slight melancholy, not of sadness, but of longing. Luke stated that he felt a gentle impulse, like a breath pulling him back, and then, almost instantly, he felt the weight and limit of his body again. The first thought he had, he reported, was about his mother. He said he felt her love calling him like a rope of light. It was as if her heart was stronger than everything else, he explained. Kübler-Ross wrote that this type of perception was recurrent in children's accounts, and she saw in it a reflection of the emotional bond as a bridge between dimensions. For Luke, the return was not a shock, but a natural passage. I just opened my eyes and knew I was still there, but also here. This ambiguity would stay with him for a long time, and the doctor described in her diary that he seemed to live between two worlds, the world of matter and the luminous memory. In the following days and weeks, the family noticed subtle yet profound changes. Luke became quieter, more observant, and demonstrated an uncommon maturity. Once, upon seeing his mother worried, he told her, "Don't cry when things end. It just means they are going to change form." Kübler-Ross, visiting the boy again, realized that he carried a contagious serenity, as if the experience had left a permanent mark of compassion. She wrote, "Luke did not just return to life. He returned with a sparkle in his eye that seemed to carry the reflection of what he saw." In the school environment, the teachers reported something similar. He showed patience with aggressive classmates, empathy with the shy ones, and a curious tendency to calm conflicts. When asked what he had learned, he replied, "That people hurt each other when they forget that they came from the same light." This sentence, once again, was noted by Kübler-Ross as a synthesis of the psychological and spiritual impact of the experience. Elizabeth also highlighted the positive emotional consequences: absence of fear of death, increased empathy, and a deep curiosity about the meaning of life. Luke seemed to carry the certainty that everything, even pain, had a purpose. "Nothing is in vain," he would say. "The light showed me that every little bit of love we give comes back multiplied." For the doctor, this conviction transformed the case into something more than a scientific curiosity. It was a testimony of inner evolution that survived the physical event itself. Over the years, Luke's case became one of the most cited references in Elizabeth Kübler-Ross's studies on near-death experiences. But, for the doctor, the real value of that story was not in the rarity of the phenomenon, but in the transformation it generated. When she met the boy again sometime later, now older, she noticed that the sparkle in his eye remained the same, perhaps even more intense. Luke continued to talk about the light, but now in a more mature way, understanding that what he had experienced was not an escape from life, but a call to live it differently. "The light taught me that being alive is remembering, every day, that love is the reason for everything to exist," he told her. Kübler-Ross recorded this reunion with emotion. She wrote that Luke had not become a preacher or a dreamer detached from reality. On the contrary, he seemed more present, more sensitive to the suffering of others. He helped classmates going through difficult times, comforted friends who had lost family members, and, according to his mother, never again showed fear of the unknown. When asked about death, he replied serenely, "We don't die. We just change addresses." This simple and luminous phrase summarized what the doctor called the broadened consciousness of continuity. The experience also transformed Elizabeth. In her lectures and books, she began to cite Luke's case as an example that childhood spirituality does not arise from doctrine, but from memory. She said that children bring a natural proximity to the mystery, something adults try to rationalize and end up forgetting. For her, Luke's gaze represented the meeting point between science and the soul. He didn't need to prove anything. His serenity was, in itself, the proof. "The light didn't tell me to come back to preach anything," the boy once said. "It just asked me to remember what it's like to be love and show that in what I do." In the following years, the account was reproduced in conferences, articles, and medical meetings. There was no sensationalism or promise, just the silent testimony of a boy who saw love from the inside and returned transformed. Elizabeth, in her final note on the case, wrote, Luke taught me that death is not the end of life, but the end of the fear of life. This sentence, marked in blue ink in her notebook, concludes the study with the force of a truth that transcends generations. Today, Luke's name remains preserved in anonymity, but his legacy continues to echo. He did not leave behind theories, only a message. The light is everywhere, there is kindness. Perhaps this is the essence of everything Kübler-Ross sought to understand. That consciousness survives not just death, but every moment we choose to love.